functioning as predators on the Neolithic cultures, farming cultures, which had already existed in those areas, in old Europe and around the whole Baltic region, the Mediterranean, including Crete, right up into northern, central Germany, southern western Russia. That whole area, there were hundreds and hundreds of different cultures and language groups, in which the two chief features that are of significance are that these were goddess cultures that apparently did not have any kind of superior, inferior subordination relationship between the sexes. It was not a matriarchy, as Maria Gimbutas emphasizes, not a matriarchy, which means the mothers dominate, the mothers control, rather than the fathers. It was, as Rian Eisler suggested, a partnership society in which men and women had equal value and had clearly distinct roles. The chief divinity was female, and it was not a mother goddess. This is also important. The mother concept has been overemphasized, I think. Again, it's something we can talk more about later. It's the life-giving and death-giving goddess, because we are given life by nature, but we're also killed by nature. So this is not a mother. A mother doesn't kill you. Nature, as an intelligence, as a spirit, is what gives us life and what takes life. So there are these images, and there are images of this goddess figure in total unitive relationship with animals, the snake and the bird, and various animals, toads, frogs, vultures, insects, bees, bears, bulls, sheep, goats, all the various animals. And no hierarchy within the society, other than possibly, there would be, in the buildings there would be a throne, but the throne was of the priestess, or the goddess would be in a central place. The goddess figurine would be in a central place. Second very important part is that in all these cultures, in these hundreds of things, there have never been found any weapons. There have never been found any fortifications. There is not the pattern that you find in later Sumerian, Babylonian, Greek, Egyptian, all these other cultures, which were all male god cultures, of a male king surrounded by all this wealth and ornaments and sometimes slaves also killed along with it, and weapons and inscriptions about the glorious deeds, militaristic deeds that the hero, the king, has done. None of that. Instead, the dead, men and women and children equally, were buried right under the house where you eat and sleep, so that you have the connection with your ancestors right under your feet, under your body, where you live. You're reminded of them. And what does this mean? This means that, see, these people were our ancestors. The nomadic, patriarchal, warrior, sky god people were our ancestors, and the peaceful, egalitarian, goddess culture people were our ancestors, because of course they intermarried. They didn't just kill the others, they destroyed the religion, but they intermarried, they had children. Both of them are our ancestors. You may be familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance, that habits of nature and culture get transmitted by repetition. That means the morphic field for a culture that's egalitarian between the sexes and that's peaceful exists within us. We have it within us. We have access to it in our psychic memory, whatever that may be, whatever form that may take. And not only that, the morphic field of that is much stronger than the morphic field of the militaristic, aggressive, dominating, patriarchal system that started around 4,000 to 3,000 years before Christ. Because those cultures go back to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, right back into the Upper Paleolithic, where you first have little stone chips inscribed with goddess symbols. These were hunter-gatherer cultures, and then pastoralist cultures, and then farming cultures. They were not fighting cultures. The fighting comes in as a result of the invaders who came in, who took over, who plundered, basically, said, here, these people are growing their food. This is much better than having to gather it. Let's just take it. Who were able to do that because they sat up high on horses, who installed their gods. Of course, I'm not saying this is sort of the gross picture, but they, of course, there was intermarriage, and much of there is evidence for peaceful interactions also, and cultural assimilation, and all of that. But the morphic field of that cultural way of life is stronger because longer in time, more people, longer period of time, than this other more new one. So that when I discovered that, when I learned this from Maria Gemuta's writings and talks, it did a change in my worldview and my paradigms that was as profound as the change that was induced when I first took LSD. Because up to that point, I'd always believed, history begins at Sumer and begins with bloodshed and warfare. And it's been bloodshed and warfare ever since. And in fact, then the biologists go along with that and say, well, we're descended from these aggressive animals. Aggression in nature raw and tooth and claw, eat or be eaten, the territorial imperative, 2001, bash the skull. That's it. We've always been that way. It's part of human nature. We can't change. Along comes this woman from Eastern Europe and says, no matriarchy, no weapons. For tens of thousands of years, 10 times, 20 times as long as our history that we'd previously thought was, this is our ancestry. This means these people are our ancestors. We know how to do that. We know how to live in an ecologically and peaceful, harmonious world. We've done it. So for that reason, I'm actually extremely hopeful, although I realize, as every one of you do, that our world situation, as you look at it today, is a total and unmitigated disaster. The apocalypse, the Armageddon, is already in full swing. It's not something that's going to happen next year or 25 years from now. It's happening now. All you need to do is read the papers, look at the television. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, war, famine, poverty, and destruction, they're all rampaging over the entire globe. Amnesty International just put out their more than 2/3 of all nation governments sanction torture as official government sanctioned practices. And the number is increasing, and the variety of torturing techniques being used and the numbers of people being used on is increasing. So there's no stretch of the imagination that can be called progress, but there are these very, very hopeful signs, and the locus of those signs is within the psyche of every single human individual, nowhere else. So, thank you for your attention.
Okay. The expectation for this afternoon is simply that we will attempt to address what concerns you have, to dialogue, to give people a chance to ask questions. It seems to me that often the most fertile part of these things is the dialogue part of it, because this is where then, instead of talking heads pontificating about whatever obsessions drive them personally, you have a chance to try and be the rudder of these public egos and steer them toward something interesting. And so the obligation is on you for the quality of rhetoric for that kind of a session. So I don't know how much was clear this morning, how much obscure, what issues it raises for people, but if someone would like to start off with a question, we would just make our way into it. Yes?
I asked him before, but you asked him to repeat it.
Yes. Before we go further, do you want people to take a microphone? How is this?
No, just speak.
Just speak loud.
Speak clearly when you ask your question. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so here's the repeated question, and it's to do with drugs, psychedelics. I know that you didn't necessarily recommend it, but you also didn't sound like you were against it. And The word has been coming up a few times.
Maybe I've overdone this even-handedness trip.
So my question is, what is there